Zoe Miller hated business trips. Especially this one. She stared through the bus window as snowflakes danced over the glass, falling like tiny diamonds. The road snaked up into the mountains and every curve brought them closer to the luxury ski resort where her boss, Jake Bennett, had decided to hold a strategic winter retreat. He called it team bonding. Zoe called it a week of pretending to like her arrogant boss. Across the aisle, Jake sat with his girlfriend, Chloe Diamond, a platinum blonde influencer whose perfume could probably be smelled from another zip code. Chloe was busy taking selfies, holding her latte in one hand and pouting at her reflection in the bus window. "Jake baby, the lighting here is so good. You should totally take one with me." Jake sighed but smiled, the kind of tight, polite smile that said he'd rather be reading financial reports. Zoe smirked and muttered under her breath. Perfect couple. One's obsessed with himself, the other with her reflection. Jake's head turned slightly. "You said something, Zoe?" "Just admiring the team dynamics, sir," she replied sweetly. He gave her a suspicious look. She gave him her most professional smile, the one she practiced in mirrors before difficult meetings. The resort appeared like something out of a movie. Wooden lodges tucked under snowy pines, fairy lights twinkling, and the scent of hot chocolate drifting from a chalet cafe. As they unloaded, Chloe squealed, "It's so cute. I need a photo right now." Jake stand next to the snowman. "No, not like that, smile more." "Ugh, no, your eyes look weird." Zoe tried not to laugh. She failed. Jake shot her a warning glance. "Something funny, Miller?" "Just admiring your photogenic leadership skills, Mr. Bennett." He rolled his eyes. "You've been my assistant too long, Zoe. You're getting brave." "Or just honest," she shot back. For a split second his mouth curved, not in mockery but in amusement. Then he turned away, pretending to check his phone. That evening after check-in, Zoe was assigned the cabin next to Jake and Chloe's, of course. Corporate efficiency at its finest. She unpacked quickly and decided to explore the slopes before dinner. She loved skiing, it was the one thing that shut off her mind. No emails, no egos, no endless PowerPoint slides. Just speed, cold air and silence. By the time she got to the ski lift, the sun was dipping behind the mountains, painting the sky pink and gold. Most people were heading back, but Zoe of course was going up. As she adjusted her helmet, a familiar voice echoed behind her. "Miller, you're still working?" She turned. Jake stood there in his designer ski gear, holding his helmet like a man who hadn't touched snow since childhood. "Not working," Zoe said. "Escaping." "From what?" She smiled. "From you mostly." Jake blinked, not sure if she was joking. Then, to her horror, he stepped into the same lift chair. "Oh no," Zoe groaned. "You can't be serious." "I need to inspect the facilities," he said, deadpan. The lift jerked upward, carrying them over the slope. Below, the snow sparkled. Above, the air was sharp and blue. They sat in awkward silence for a few moments. Chloe's laughter drifted faintly from somewhere down below, where she was likely taking another 100 photos near the cafe fire pit. Finally, Jake said, "You really don't like me, do you?" Zoe raised an eyebrow. What gave it away? The sarcasm or the eye rolls? He laughed genuinely this time. "You're different from everyone else at the office. You don't suck up to me." "That's because you already have enough people doing that," she said. "Someone has to keep your ego from floating away." Jake smirked. "And you've taken that noble mission upon yourself?" "Apparently." They exchanged a long glance, the kind that felt strangely too warm for the freezing air. Zoe looked away first. At the top of the hill, the wind hit harder. Zoe clipped her boots into her skis with practiced ease. Jake, however, fumbled. "You do know how to ski, right?" she asked. "Of course," he said, clearly lying. "Right," Zoe said, crossing her arms. "Just checking before I watch my boss roll down the mountain. I'll manage." He didn't. The moment he pushed off, he lost balance, swayed dramatically, and toppled straight into the snow, taking Zoe with him when she tried to help. The world blurred into a flurry of white. They landed tangled together, laughing, half covered in snow. "Oh my God," Zoe gasped, trying to catch her breath. "You're terrible at this." Jake chuckled. "You said you wanted to see me outside the office. Now you have." Covered in snow and humiliation? Adds character. They were still laughing when Chloe's voice pierced the air. Jake, what are you doing? You're supposed to be waiting for dinner. Zoe scrambled up, brushing off snow. Chloe stomped toward them, holding her phone like a weapon. You're completely ruining your jacket. It's cashmere. Jake sighed. It's fine, Chloe. It's not fine. We're supposed to take photos before sunset. Zoe bit her lip to stop from laughing again. Jake caught the look, and for the first time didn't seem angry. Just amused. Go ahead, Miller, he said softly. I'll deal with the Snow Queen. As Zoe glided down the hill, she could still hear Chloe complaining. But all Zoe could think about was the look Jake gave her before she left. Half annoyed, half something else. Something dangerous. Something she really didn't want to think about. That night in her cabin, Zoe stared at the ceiling. Outside, snow kept falling, muffling the world in white silence. This trip was supposed to be about work, about professionalism. But somehow she had ended up in a ski lift with her boss, laughing like a teenager, and crashing into a snowbank with him on top of her. She sighed, pulling the blanket over her head. This is going to be a very long week. The next morning hit with a blinding shine off the snow. The kind of brightness that felt like karma for staying up too late thinking about things you shouldn't be thinking about. Zoe sipped her coffee in the lodge, scrolling through her phone and pretending not to notice Jake and Chloe at the next table. Chloe was dressed head to toe in bubblegum pink ski gear, a matching faux fur hat, and a full face of makeup that probably weighed more than her skis. Babe, I don't actually ski, Chloe was saying. I pose with skis. It's totally different. Jake rubbed his temples. Then what exactly did you pack 3 suitcases for? Options, Chloe said. Fashion is about options. Zoe nearly snorted coffee through her nose. Jake looked up, catching her smirk. Something funny, Miller? Just admiring your leadership flexibility, she said, deadpan. He raised an eyebrow. You really enjoy mocking me, don't you? It's a survival mechanism. He looked like he might reply, but Chloe interrupted, snapping her fingers at a waiter. Excuse me, can I get my pancakes with exactly 3 blueberries on top? Not 2, not 4. 3. Jake exhaled slowly, like a man reminding himself he chose this life. A few hours later, the team gathered outside for the optional group skiing activity. Zoe was already in her element, bright blue jacket, confident smile, skis gliding smoothly across the snow. She waved to the rest of the group. Chloe appeared 10 minutes late, carried by Jake like an accessory. Her skis were still wrapped in the shop plastic. Isn't this fun? Zoe said cheerfully. Chloe frowned. Fun? It's freezing. My mascara's turning into icicles. Jake tried to help her with the bindings, but Chloe squealed. Don't touch. You'll smudge my gloves. Zoe pressed her lips together, fighting laughter. Jake gave her a look, half warning, half plea for patience. All right, Zoe said, trying to sound professional. We'll start with a gentle slope. Chloe, just follow my lead. I'd rather not move at all, Chloe said flatly. Zoe smiled sweetly. Perfect. Then you'll do great. 10 minutes later, Chloe was on the ground, skis crossed, fur hat missing in action, and Jake was chasing after her rogue pole. Zoe skied over effortlessly, stopping beside them in a shower of snow. Need a rescue team? She teased. Jake gave her a look that could melt glaciers. Don't you dare laugh. Too late, Zoe said, grinning. Chloe pouted. This is your fault, Jake. I told you I don't like nature. Snow is not nature, Chloe. It's weather, Jake said carefully. Zoe snorted again. Brilliant argument, boss. 10 out of 10. He looked at her, eyes narrowing, but there was a spark of amusement there now. Remind me to adjust your performance review. After the chaos, Zoe decided to sneak away for one proper ski run. She needed it. The crisp air, the rush, the world blurring around her. It made everything simpler. But halfway down the slope she spotted Jake again, wobbling like a penguin in a suit. Seriously? She shouted, skiing beside him. Didn't you learn yesterday? He grinned. Practice makes progress. Or concussions, she said. He nearly fell again, but this time Zoe grabbed his arm, steadying him. Their gloves brushed. A quick touch, but enough to send a spark of something through both of them. Jake looked at her, really looked at her. Not as his assistant, not as the sarcastic woman who teased him in meetings. Just her. Cheeks flushed from the cold, eyes bright, smile unguarded. Thanks, he said quietly. For saving your ego, she teased. For not letting me fall again, he corrected. They stood there for a second too long. Then Zoe cleared her throat and pointed downhill. Come on, boss. Time to prove you can make it down alive. Back at the lodge, Chloe had already recovered and was sitting by the fire with a mug of hot chocolate topped with enough whipped cream to drown a toddler. When Jake and Zoe walked in, Chloe looked up, eyes narrowing slightly. Where have you been? I've been freezing here alone. Jake sighed. We were skiing. We. Chloe repeated, her tone sharp as ice. Zoe smiled politely. Jake's improving. I think he almost managed 10 meters upright. Chloe forced a laugh. Oh, good for him. Zoe felt the tension immediately. A shift, a tiny crack in Chloe's perfect smile. She decided to excuse herself before the air froze over completely. I'll send the meeting notes later, Mr. Bennett, she said and turned to leave. Zoe, Jake started, but she was already halfway out the door. That night, the team had dinner in the main restaurant. Long wooden tables, golden lighting, laughter echoing from all corners. Jake sat at the head, Chloe by his side, but his eyes kept drifting toward Zoe at the far end of the table. She was laughing with two colleagues, hair falling over her face, completely at ease. And something about that smile, effortless, genuine, hit him harder than he expected. Chloe noticed. Of course she did. Her manicured hand slid onto his arm. Jake, baby, are you even listening? Huh? Yeah, of course. I said, Chloe repeated. We should skip skiing tomorrow and just go shopping. There's a boutique in the village. Jake hesitated. That's not really the point of the trip. The point, she said sweetly, is to relax. You work too hard. Zoe glanced up at that exact moment, catching his expression, trapped between duty and exhaustion. Their eyes met. She grinned faintly, mouthing, shopping retreat, huh? Jake had to bite his lip to stop himself from laughing. Later, as the team started leaving, Jake found himself outside on the snowy terrace, taking a quiet breath. The night was still, moonlight spilling across the white slopes. He didn't even hear Zoe approach until she spoke. Don't worry. I won't tell anyone about your skiing technique. He turned, smirking. You mean my athletic grace? I mean the part where you fell on your CEO. Jake chuckled. You're impossible. And you're surprisingly human, she said softly. That made him pause. Is that supposed to be a compliment? Maybe. They stood there, cold air between them, something unspoken simmering underneath the jokes. Finally, Zoe smiled. Good night, Mr. Bennett. Try not to ski into any trees tomorrow. Good night, Miller. Try not to make fun of your boss so much. No promises. She walked away, leaving Jake alone in the quiet. For the first time in a long while, he realized he was actually looking forward to tomorrow. By day 3, Zoe was starting to think the mountain had a sense of humor, the kind that liked to watch her suffer. Every time she tried to avoid Jake, he somehow ended up in her orbit. Breakfast. He accidentally sat at her table. Team briefing. He asked for her opinion first. Lunch break? He was suddenly walking beside her, pretending it was pure coincidence. And every time, Chloe was right there, heels clicking across the wooden floors like a warning signal. Babe, do we really have to do this meeting thing again? Chloe groaned one morning. We're supposed to be on vacation. Jake didn't even look up from his laptop. It's a working vacation, Chloe. Key difference. Yeah, the difference is no one's having fun, she snapped. Zoe bit her lip, pretending to type something urgent. The tension was thick enough to ski on. Finally, Chloe huffed and stood up. Fine. I'm going to the spa. Don't wait up. As she stormed off, Zoe whispered, I think your girlfriend just resigned from your relationship. Jake groaned. You really don't have an off switch, do you? Not when the content's this entertaining. He shot her a glare. She smiled sweetly. That evening, the team gathered in the resort's main lodge for the formal dinner. The big bonding night Jake had planned weeks ago. Fairy lights glowed overhead, the fireplace crackled, and the air smelled of cinnamon and pine. Zoe walked in wearing a simple navy dress, hair loose over her shoulders. Nothing fancy, but somehow she still managed to steal the room's attention without trying. Jake noticed immediately. Actually, he noticed too much. The curve of her smile, the way her laughter sounded brighter than the music. Chloe noticed too, and she did not like it. During dinner, Jake tried to keep the conversation balanced, but Chloe's voice dominated the table. "Oh my God, you guys, have you seen the restaurant lighting here? It's terrible for photos. I had to fix everything in editing." "Jake, show them." "Chloe," Jake interrupted, forcing a polite tone. "Maybe we could talk about, the company?" "The company doesn't photograph well," she said, rolling her eyes. Zoe snorted quietly into her wine glass. Jake glared at her again. "Something amusing, Miller?" "Just admiring your public relations skills, sir." A few people laughed. Jake couldn't help it, he did too. Chloe's eyes narrowed. "What's so funny?" "Nothing, babe," Jake said quickly. "Really? Because every time she speaks, you suddenly remember how to smile." The table went awkwardly silent. Zoe's fork froze midair. Jake cleared his throat. "Let's toast to a productive trip." "To something," Zoe muttered under her breath. After dinner, people drifted toward the bar or the lounge. Zoe decided to sneak out to the terrace. She needed air. The snow outside glittered under the moonlight, soft and untouched. She leaned on the railing, exhaling slowly. Her breath came out in small white clouds. "Trying to escape me again?" She didn't have to turn around to recognize the voice. "Not everything's about you, Mr. Bennett," she said without looking back. He stepped beside her, hands in his coat pockets. "Statistically, with you, it kind of is." "Wow," Zoe said, smirking. "So humble." Jake chuckled, but then his tone softened. "Sorry about dinner. Chloe can be dramatic." "She's just different," Zoe said diplomatically. "Different?" "Yeah, from people who actually live on this planet." Jake laughed, and for a moment, the sound mixed with the wind and felt easy. He said, "I used to think you hated me." "I did hate you," she said. "You were arrogant, bossy, and allergic to saying thank you." He grinned. "And now? Now you're slightly less arrogant, still bossy, and occasionally tolerable." "Progress," he said with mock pride. They stood there, the air between them thick with something unsaid. The cold bit at Zoe's cheeks, but her pulse felt too warm. Jake's gaze dropped. Not in a calculated way, but in that unguarded moment when someone realizes they're staring too long. Zoe broke the silence first. "You should go back inside before Chloe sends a search party." "She's busy," he said quietly. "Taking pictures of her dessert, I think." "Good," Zoe said, forcing a smile. "You'll be safe from Instagram for at least 5 minutes." He smiled too but didn't move. "You're good at this." "At what?" "Keeping me in check. Making me human." Zoe laughed softly. "That's a first. Usually people say I make them crazy." He tilted his head, studying her. "Maybe both." The words hung in the air, warm, electric. Suddenly, the terrace door opened. "Jake." Chloe's voice cut through the cold. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere." She stepped outside, clutching her phone and pouting. "Everyone left, and you're just talking?" Jake straightened instantly, professional mask back on. "Just discussing tomorrow's itinerary." Zoe forced a smile. "Yes, we were brainstorming the snow logistics. Very serious business." Chloe blinked. "Snow logistics? Big topic," Zoe said. "Hard to explain without charts." Jake choked back a laugh. Chloe just frowned, clearly confused but too tired to argue. "Well, whatever," Chloe said finally. "We're taking photos by the fire before bed. Jake, come on." As they walked away, Jake looked back once. Just a glance, but long enough for Zoe to catch it. And maybe that was the problem, because that look said too much. Later that night, Zoe sat by her cabin window watching the snow fall. It was peaceful, quiet, the kind of silence that felt almost sacred. She pulled her blanket closer, trying to ignore the warmth in her chest. "He's your boss," she muttered. A rich, complicated, emotionally unavailable boss with a model girlfriend. She groaned, burying her face in her pillow. "You're doomed, Miller. Absolutely doomed." But even as she said it, she couldn't stop smiling, just a little. By day 4, the resort had settled into its rhythm. Coffee in the lodge, meetings in the morning, skiing in the afternoon, and drama in between. Zoe woke up feeling oddly restless. Maybe it was the altitude. Maybe the air. Or maybe it was the fact that every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jake's stupid smile in the snowlight. Not good, Miller. Not good at all. She forced herself out of bed, dressed in her gear, and decided to focus on what she was good at, skiing. At least the slopes didn't flirt back. Outside, the morning was crisp and glittering. Zoe clipped on her skis and headed for the trail, loving the rush of cold air and the freedom that came with it. She didn't notice Jake until he shouted from behind her. "Miller! Wait up!" She turned and groaned. "Don't tell me you're skiing again." "Not skiing," he said, catching his breath. "Supervising." "Supervising what? My balance?" "Your attitude," he shot back. Zoe smirked. "Good luck with that." He grinned, stepping closer. "Seriously though, I wanted to thank you for being patient with all of this." "You mean Chloe's daily performances?" "I mean everything," Jake said, softer this time. Zoe blinked, suddenly unsure what to say. You're welcome?" He looked like he wanted to add something, but before he could, a high-pitched voice called out from behind them. "Jake! There you are." Chloe, in a bright pink snowsuit with rhinestones, carrying her phone like it was made of gold. "Oh, perfect," she said, hurrying toward them. "Let's take a picture together. The snow looks amazing right now." Zoe stepped aside automatically. "I'll leave you too." No, Chloe interrupted, smiling too sweetly. "You're part of the team, right? Let's all take one." Zoe froze. "Oh, that's not necessary." But Chloe was already dragging Jake between them. The camera clicked. Then another. Then 10 more. "Smile wider," Chloe said through her teeth. "Zoe, could you not stand that close to Jake? You're kind of blocking the background." Zoe moved half a step away. "Better?" "Almost," Chloe said, eyes sharp. "Actually, maybe just one of me and Jake now." "Of course," Zoe said, forcing a polite smile. She snapped the photo, then handed the phone back. Chloe examined it critically. "Ugh. My hair looks flat. We'll redo it later." Zoe exhaled slowly through her nose. She was starting to admire Jake for surviving this long. A few hours later, the group headed to the frozen lake for a skating event. Chloe refused to go near the ice, claiming it was not a vibe, so Jake ended up skating with the team, and inevitably next to Zoe. "I can't believe you're actually doing this," she teased, tying her skates. "I'm adaptable," he said. "Besides, it's good leadership, showing I'm not afraid of challenges." "Like gravity?" Jake gave her a look. "You never stop, do you?" "Nope." They stepped onto the ice. Zoe glided effortlessly, graceful and sure. Jake less so. He tried to copy her turns, failed miserably, and ended up clinging to the railing like it was a lifeline. "Need help, boss?" Zoe asked, skating backward with a grin. "I'm perfectly fine," he lied, wobbling dangerously. Totally convincing. She skated toward him and took his hands. "Come on, I'll guide you." "This is humiliating," he muttered. "This is physics," she corrected. "Lean into it." As he followed her lead, their movements synced, slow at first, then smoother. Their eyes met for a moment, too long, breath misting between them in the cold. "See," Zoe said softly. "Not so hard when you stop fighting it." "I could say the same to you," he murmured. Her heartbeat stuttered. She looked away quickly. "You're getting better. Thanks to my excellent instructor." She smiled, and then of course fate intervened. Jake's skate caught an edge. He stumbled forward, grabbing Zoe for balance. They both went down in a heap, sliding across the ice and landing in a tangled pile near the railing. For a second, neither of them moved. Just laughter, breathless and real. "Well," Jake said finally, "I think we nailed the landing." 10 out of 10, Zoe said between giggles. "Very graceful." He was still laughing when Chloe's voice echoed from the sidelines. "Jake, what is this?" Zoe scrambled up instantly. "We fell," she explained. "Physics again." Chloe stomped closer, glaring. "Are you okay, babe? You could have broken something." "Just my pride," Jake said lightly. Chloe turned her glare on Zoe. "Maybe some people shouldn't be so hands-on with their boss." Zoe blinked, stunned. Excuse me. You heard me, Chloe said, her tone sugary but sharp. You're a little too comfortable, don't you think? Jake stepped in. Chloe, that's enough. No, it's not, she snapped. You've been spending half this trip with her. Because we're working, he said firmly. Oh, sure, Chloe said with a bitter laugh. Working. In the snow. Laughing. Falling all over each other. Zoe's cheeks burned. From cold, from embarrassment, from something else entirely. Chloe, she said quietly, I think you're overreacting. I think you're enjoying this, Chloe shot back. Jake's voice was low but steady. Chloe, stop. For a moment, the three of them stood in silence. Snow fell softly around them, muffling everything except the sound of Jake's breath and Zoe's pounding heartbeat. Finally, Chloe turned away. You know what? I'm done. I'm going to the lodge. Enjoy your team bonding. She stalked off, leaving a trail of angry footprints. Zoe sighed, rubbing her face. Well, that went great. Jake gave her a helpless smile. She'll calm down. She looked ready to set me on fire. She can't. There's too much snow. Despite herself, Zoe laughed. Jake looked at her, really looked at her, and the humor faded into something heavier. Zoe, he started then stopped. Forget it. No, say it. It's just, you make this trip bearable. She froze, words failing her. That's not professional, she said finally, half joking, half serious. Neither is falling on ice, he said. They stood there in the cold, the world quiet around them. For a heartbeat, it felt like the only two people on the mountain were them. Then Zoe forced herself to step back. You should go talk to Chloe. I will. Good. She turned away, heart racing, mind spinning. That night, back in her cabin, Zoe stared at the ceiling again. Same ceiling. Different thoughts. She wasn't supposed to care. He wasn't supposed to notice her. And yet here they were, tangled in something neither of them could define. Outside, snow kept falling, slow, endless, inevitable. Just like this thing between them. The snowstorm hit faster than anyone expected. By afternoon, the sky had turned the color of steel, the wind howled through the trees, and the resort staff began warning guests to stay inside until it passed. Zoe stood by the window of the meeting lodge, watching the snowfall blur the mountain trails into white nothingness. The team's last workshop session had been canceled. Not that anyone was upset. Everyone had retreated to their cabins with board games, wine, or in Chloe's case, a full-on photo shoot in front of the fireplace. Zoe had planned to spend the evening reading and pretending her boss didn't exist. But of course, fate, or the universe's twisted sense of humor, had other plans. She was halfway back to her cabin when the wind picked up, snow whipping against her face. She squinted, pulling her scarf higher, and then heard someone shouting behind her. Zoe! Wait! Jake. She turned to see him trudging through the storm, coat half-zipped, snow in his hair. Are you crazy? She shouted over the wind. Apparently, he yelled back. The main path's blocked. Come on this way. Before she could protest, he grabbed her hand and pulled her toward a small wooden cabin at the edge of the trail. It looked like an old maintenance hut, dark, quiet, but at least solid. They stumbled inside, slamming the door against the storm. For a few seconds they just stood there, breathing hard, snow melting off their jackets. Well, Zoe said finally, brushing off her sleeves. This isn't exactly the five-star chalet experience. Jake laughed under his breath. At least it's warm. He found a lantern on the shelf and switched it on. The small space glowed golden, one bench, a small stove, and not much else. Zoe sighed. So we're stuck here until the storm passes? Looks like it. Perfect, she muttered. Trapped with my boss in a cabin. Totally normal. Jake smiled faintly. You make it sound like a horror movie. It might become one if you start giving me tasks. He chuckled, taking off his gloves. I'll try to resist. After a while, the silence between them softened. The storm roared outside, but inside it felt strangely calm. Zoe sat on the bench, hugging her knees. Chloe's probably wondering where you are. Jake hesitated. She's probably fine. That doesn't sound convincing. He rubbed his temples. We argued again. She said she's tired of this trip, tired of me being distracted. Zoe looked up. Distracted by what? He met her eyes. You. The word hung in the air, heavier than the snow outside. Zoe's throat went dry. Jake. I didn't mean for it to happen, he said quickly. You're my assistant. You're supposed to annoy me, not make you forget your girlfriend, she finished softly. He exhaled, frustrated. It's not that simple. Sure it is, she said. You're with someone. I work for you. The end. Jake ran a hand through his hair. You think I don't know that? Then why are we having this conversation? Because, he said, stepping closer. Every time I see you, every time you roll your eyes or laugh or challenge me, I feel something I can't ignore anymore. Zoe stood up, heart pounding. Jake, stop. I can't. The storm howled louder, wind rattling the windows. She turned away, trying to steady her breathing. You don't mean that. You're just frustrated. You and Chloe are having issues, and I'm. What? He asked, voice low. The convenient distraction. Jake froze. Then quietly he said, You really think that's all you are to me? Zoe didn't answer. He sighed, sitting on the edge of the bench. You're not. You're the only person who doesn't treat me like a headline. You tell me when I'm wrong. You make me better even when I don't want to be. Zoe turned, finally meeting his eyes. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because I might start believing them. The silence that followed was unbearable and perfect. The kind of silence where everything true existed, unspoken. After a while, Zoe sat down beside him. Their shoulders brushed. Neither moved away. Chloe's not a bad person, Jake said quietly. She just doesn't see me the way you do. Zoe forced a smile. That's probably a good thing. I see all your flaws. Exactly, he said, smiling faintly. And somehow you still talk to me. Barely. They both laughed, the kind of laugh that releases tension instead of adding to it. Outside, the storm softened slightly, snow tapping gently against the window. Jake leaned back, watching the light flicker across the walls. You know, I always thought I wanted someone like Chloe. Polished perfect, always on display. And now I'm starting to think perfection's overrated. Zoe shook her head. Careful. You're starting to sound human again. Don't tell anyone. It'll ruin my reputation. She smiled, a small, tired, genuine smile. Hours passed. The lantern's glow dimmed, and the wind quieted. Jake dozed off against the wall, coat still on, hair tousled. Zoe watched him for a moment, just long enough to notice the small, unguarded peace on his face. He wasn't the arrogant boss then. Just a man. Flawed. Tired. Real. She pulled a blanket from the shelf and gently draped it over him. Good night, boss, she whispered. He stirred, eyes half open. Zoe. Yeah. Thanks for not hating me. She smiled faintly. Don't push your luck. He smiled too, eyes closing again. When morning came, the storm had passed. The world outside was quiet, untouched. A new layer of snow over everything. Zoe stood by the window, watching the sunrise spill gold across the mountains. Jake woke slowly, rubbing his neck. Still alive, he mumbled. Barely, she said. You snore. I do not. You absolutely do. He laughed, and something in that sound felt lighter than it had in days. Then their eyes met again. The air shifted. Zoe, he started. She shook her head gently. Don't. But. Let's just keep this simple, she said, pulling on her gloves. You have a girlfriend. I have a job. And neither of us wants to ruin that. He nodded slowly. Right. But as they stepped outside into the blinding snow, neither could shake the quiet truth that the storm hadn't just been outside. Something had changed between them, something impossible to undo. The final day of the retreat arrived with an almost cinematic perfection. The sun reflected off the snow in a dazzling sparkle, the mountain air was crisp, and the resort hummed with the quiet buzz of departing guests. Zoe packed her gear quietly, savoring the last moments of freedom. Skiing, laughter, and chaos had woven themselves into a tapestry she didn't want to leave behind. And yet, leaving meant reality would resume, with its emails, schedules, and professional boundaries. Jake appeared at the cabin doorway, carrying his backpack. Chloe was still busy with a camera in the main lodge, posing for some last-minute sunset shots. Ready? He asked. As ready as I'll ever be, Zoe replied. They walked toward the lodge together, snow crunching beneath their boots. Jake stole glances at her, as if memorizing the way the light caught her hair, how her laughter floated over the wind. Chloe spotted them almost immediately. "Oh, there you are, Jake," she called, hurrying over in impossibly tall snow boots. "You've been so distant." Jake froze slightly, and Zoe felt the familiar tightening in her chest. "I've been busy," he said cautiously. Chloe pouted. "Busy? With her?" Zoe flinched, but Jake didn't waver. He turned to face Chloe fully. "Chloe, listen," he said firmly. "This trip has been about work. About the team. Not whatever this is." He gestured slightly at Zoe, who stood quietly beside him. Chloe's lips parted. "So you're saying?" "Yes," Jake said. "I think it's clear we're not compatible." Zoe blinked. Part of her wanted to laugh, part of her wanted to cry. Chloe's face flushed, a mix of shock and indignation. "But," Chloe began, but Jake shook his head. "No. It's over. Enjoy your vacation, but you're not my girlfriend anymore." Chloe's jaw dropped, and she pivoted sharply, storming toward the lodge. Zoe bit back a grin. Jake turned to her, exhaling slowly. "I'm sorry you had to see that," he said. "You did the right thing," she said softly. "Honestly." Jake's shoulders relaxed for the first time that day. He offered her a small, sheepish smile. "I guess this makes things simpler." Zoe tilted her head. "Simpler? I wouldn't call any of this simple." He laughed lightly. "Right. Complicated, maybe. But worth it." The rest of the morning passed in quiet camaraderie. Guests packed up, shuttles ran back and forth, and Zoe and Jake stayed slightly behind the group. At one point, they found themselves standing on the terrace overlooking the mountains, the snow untouched and gleaming. "You know," Jake said, voice low, "I wasn't expecting to enjoy this trip." "Me neither," Zoe replied. "But somehow it worked out." He looked at her for a long moment. "I owe you an apology. And a thank you. For everything. For the patience, the laughs, the being human." Zoe smiled faintly, heart-pounding. "And I owe you a warning. Don't make me regret it." He laughed. "Noted." Then there was a pause. The kind of pause that carries all the words you don't say. "You know," she said finally, "we'll have to go back to the real world soon. And pretend everything's normal?" "Yes." "Good," he said. "I think we're both tired of pretending." When it was finally time to leave, the bus waited outside. Zoe hoisted her bag and glanced back at the resort one last time. The snow glistened like diamonds in the morning sun, a perfect ending to a chaotic week. Jake stepped beside her. "Same time next year?" he asked, half joking. "Next year," she raised an eyebrow. "Or whenever the next storm hits," he said, smiling. Zoe laughed softly. "We'll see. Maybe the mountains need a break from us." The bus doors closed. Chloe sat sulking a few rows ahead, earbuds in, pretending not to notice them. Zoe shook her head, smiling. Jake caught her glance, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Words weren't needed. The mountains receded into the distance, snow glittering on the slopes, and for the first time, Zoe felt the weight of expectations lift. Jake nudged her lightly. "So what now?" "I don't know," she said, shrugging. "We go back to work, pretend nothing happened, and see what happens next." He smiled, leaning back. "Sounds dangerously promising." Zoe shook her head, laughing quietly. "You're impossible. And you love it," he said, smirking. She rolled her eyes, but her smile said it all. The bus rumbled down the mountain road. Chloe glued to her phone, snowflakes still dancing outside. And somewhere between the fading peaks and the receding clouds, something new had begun for Jake and Zoe. Something that neither rules nor titles could define. The snow would melt. Life would go on. But whatever this was, their story was only just starting.